Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Dear brothers and sisters, inshallah you are all well and having a blessed day of Quds. I wish you all success in the next, hopefully inshallah, 2 days, day and a half of our fasting as we get to our final day. Inshallah, either Sunday or Monday will be the day of Eid. So I wish you all a pleasant, happy, joyous day of Eid, and wishing you full day and year of blessings and barakah for you and your respective families. And may you always be in the guidance of the Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt, as well as Allah's mercy. And I wish you all the happiest and joyous occasion as we build up into that highly anticipated time. I know it's a day of Eid and celebration, but it's actually truly a sad day for me, only because I get this major lull afterwards. The excitement that comes with Ramadan and its blessings and its peace and mercy. So may it be your, may it not be your last, may it be your special occasion on an annually basis for as long as you all are on this planet and we're all here together. Today I'm going to talk about cholesterol, but I'm going to also cover another very interesting, very highly, I think, somewhat, I guess, controversial topic, but I think I kind of added it only because I know there's a huge kind of social media, even though I'm not in social media, but a huge amount of debate and questions. And I know with this new administration coming in and all the turmoil that it has caused on many different angles, there's some interesting aspects in terms of our healthcare and our future of our health for ourselves and our children, and the future of Americans and the world in general, as America does lead the health aspects of research and what have you, and the FDA kind of sets the tone around the world for many other regulatory bodies, although that's kind of transitioning over the last several years that I've noticed, certainly within the last decade. So let's dive into cholesterol first, and then we'll pivot and actually talk about a product called methylene blue, and some of the benefits, risks, what is it, why is it coming up all of a sudden, and some interesting aspects of the future of research in healthcare in the U.S. and abroad. So starting back with cholesterol, there's this misnomer that LDL, or low density lipoprotein cholesterol, is the quote unquote bad cholesterol, and versus HDL, which is the high density lipoprotein, is considered the good cholesterol. So you probably hear that, you hear doctors talking about it, or friends, family, even yourself, you've probably read it online or have this misnomer. Interestingly, actually LDL is not an actual cholesterol. So it's not actually technically cholesterol. It's a transport system, or it's a protein that is a transport mechanism for shuttling cholesterol to places all over your body, so that you have sufficient cholesterol to be able to survive, and it keeps you healthy. So the LDL actually takes cholesterol. It's the transporters, kind of think of it as like a vehicle or a train, that it takes cholesterol from your liver into your vascular cells, which is your blood cells. And then HDL does vice versa. It's not the passenger, but it is the train, if you will, or the vehicle transportation system from your vascular cells to the liver. So that's why there's this misnomer that LDL is taking cholesterol from your liver and pumping it into the blood, and that can lead to horrible side effects like heart disease and stroke and heart attacks, whereas HDL is a good guy or a good woman that it takes the cholesterol away from the blood and back to the liver. So this is how this whole misnomer, misperception came to be. Interestingly, your body makes about, I think the data that I saw was 3,000 milligrams per day of cholesterol. Unbelievable. So 3,000 milligrams, not a small amount. That would be equivalent to about 14 eggs, 300 strips of bacon, or about roughly a whole pound of butter. So if you ate that much, that's how much cholesterol you would be getting, equivalent to your body just making cholesterol. And then the liver is the main producer. So it makes up roughly about 80%. And then you get another 20% of cholesterol coming in from your diet. So it is important to get cholesterol from your diet. The key is to keep it under control, right? Keeping your cholesterol under control. So why does the body need to make so much cholesterol? Why does it need to make this 3,000 milligrams per day? So most importantly, cholesterol makes the raw material for your cell membranes. So all your cells, everything that is in your body needs cholesterol to be able to function. We have roughly, subhanAllah, this number is just amazing. I can't even fathom the number, let alone even try to count it. 100 trillion cells is what our body's made of. What else does cholesterol do? It makes vitamin D. It helps with bile creation. So bile's what moves the fats and what have you, transports the fats and what have you in, and it's connecting the gallbladder to the liver. And believe it or not, actually, cholesterol has antioxidant properties. So it's really, really important to have cholesterol in the body. Otherwise, the cells in the body can't function. Cholesterol also makes cortisol and all sex hormones. So either estrogen, testosterone. It's really important for its functioning. And then cholesterol's other big response or responsibility is to respond to crisis, things like infections or what have you. Fundamentally, there's two types of LDL. So now if we just funnel it down and focus on LDL, there's two types. There's a type A, and those are the ones that are larger. They're more buoyant, so they're kind of bouncy or they can float. And these are normal. They don't cause any issues. They usually last for about 2 days, and then they break down. So this is what, when somebody says you have LDL bad, it's not really bad necessarily, because type A is not a problem. In fact, type A is really good. So now you got type B. These are the ones that are small and they're dense. These are the ones that can create plaques. They can cause oxidation, and they last a lot longer. They're 5 days, so almost over double the life, 2.5 times the life of type A. So type B is the ones that we need to be watchful or careful of. So now let's say you've done some blood work and they say, hey, your LDL's up, or you look at your blood test results. It's kind of antiquated nowadays. You need to be a lot more sophisticated when we're doing blood tests. But you need to look at also if your LDL comes back and it's a little high, first of all, we need to find out, are they type A, type B, and we'll talk about that. But the other thing we need to do is also look at your triglycerides and your HDL levels as well. So what are triglycerides is the next question asked. So triglycerides are blood lipids. They're fats in the blood that the body uses to create energy or to store fat for later use. So it's kind of your safety mechanism or your emergency response if and when needed. So when the body has to make triglycerides, it's taking it from sugar and carbs. So anytime we eat sugar or carbohydrates, the liver converts them into triglycerides, basically to store it, to say, hey, in that instance that you run out of food or you're going to need energy, that you're going to be starving, there's going to be a problem, I'm going to store it here. And this is the problem with when you eat sugar and carbs and don't burn it. So if you're like let's say a soccer player, a basketball player, a professional athlete, if they have carbs and they burn it, then it doesn't have time to store in the liver, and the liver doesn't need to convert it. Again, although there's been a lot of literature and publications recently to say, in fact, athletic performance is no different. So there's this misnomer. A big study, I might have mentioned it before, in Germany with professional athletes indicated that whether these people, the athletes were fasted or used carbohydrates or some sort of fuel, there was absolutely zero difference between the two. So there's this misnomer that you need carbs to be able to go. But let's assume, for the sake of argument, that you need sugar or carbs to be able to function, the good sugars, right? Fruits, things like that. Then you burn it and you don't have the time, you don't give the body enough time to be able to create the triglycerides. So that's why it's good to have it in moderation. Or if you do have it, if you have a carb diet, or you eat something with carbs, exercising, moving, burning it, so it doesn't get stored is really important. Otherwise, it turns into triglycerides, and that can have long-term health consequences, heart disease, and so on and so forth. So now we said, okay, your LDL is up. Everybody starts hitting the panic button, including your doctor. Next thing we got to do is look at triglycerides and HDL. So the recipe is that if triglycerides are high, so again, your LDL is high. If the triglycerides are high, and your HDL or your HDL is low, then you likely are indicative of having that type B. And remember that type B is the small, dense cells that are problematic for heart disease and overall oxidation and health deterioration. Whereas on the flip side, if you have low triglycerides, so you have triglycerides that are low, again, LDL is high, triglycerides are low, and your HDL is high, then you likely have type A LDL, which is the good LDL, which is large and buoyant, and they're normal. They're not going to be problematic. They're not going to get stuck in the arteries somewhere and cause a problem. They're the ones that are going to, in fact, help create the hormones that we talked about and respond to inflammation and other potential disastrous issues. So what we found is that saturated fats increase type A. So when you eat a saturated fat meal, it increases type A LDL cholesterol, whereas if you eat carbs and sugar, then that causes type B, right? So again, the lesson here learned that if you're eating saturated fats, there's really three things at play here, right? So you have carbohydrates, again, protein, and fats. So if you partake of the carbs, including sugars, which carb is a form of sugar in essence, it will then likely convert to type B problem. Whereas if you're eating saturated fats, things like whole fat milk, cheese, avocado, what else would there be? We talked about olives. Any of these saturated fats, maybe grass-fed, grass-finished beef, veal, lamb, these types of food that will increase or has high saturated fat, these go and get turned into type A, not type B. So again, carbs and sugars, type B, bad news. So this is where you want to be really careful. Type B is not necessarily also the bad guy either, although I'm painting a picture that type B is bad. Type B is actually there, as we talked about, it responds to a crisis. That's what cholesterol is intended to do. And this crisis here is that when the body senses there's inflammation and it needs to heal the inflammation, then the type B is there to go to heal the inflammation. So it notices inflammation within the blood cells or any tissue or any cells. It's going to go there to try to solve the problem. So it's kind of an innocent bystander, but it gets labeled as the bad guy or the bad lady. So what we need to do is look at what is the underlying issue. But the problem is type B is there to kind of heal. It doesn't know, right? It doesn't have a brain. So it's like, all it says is there's inflammation. I'm going to get there. I'm going to go heal that inflammation. And that process, in that process, it creates plaquing or clotting. So when it does the plaquing or clotting, that's when the artery gets clogged. And this is called atherosclerosis. And when it does that, then that leads to cardiovascular health risk, right? Things like heart attack, stroke, transient ischemic attacks, any of these other potential issues that can impact your cardiovascular health. So what are the causes of these types of issues? So if you have poor diet, obviously big issue, lifestyle type habits, things like smoking. I know, alhamdulillah, none of us do it, but alcohol consumption that can cause an issue. Processed or ultra processed diets can be an issue. Obesity definitely can be an issue. Lack of exercise. These all can lead to imbalanced cholesterol levels where you have LDL, HDL, triglycerides, all these out of whack. Unfortunately, for people that have low thyroid or hypothyroidism, I raise my hand, I have Hashimoto's. For us, we're at higher risk. So typically people that have thyroid disorders, where the thyroid isn't functioning well, they're at risk for having cholesterol issues, and they need to keep an eye on it. High cortisol. So stress, if you're under stress, high cortisol being stress from either physical stress. So if you're overtraining, a lot of times athletes can go under tremendous stress because they're, constantly, they just don't get enough rest. Mental stress, obviously, right? Not sleeping enough, not getting enough exercise. All these things can cause the cortisol to spike, and we've talked about that in previous lectures. Vegetable oils. This is a big, big issue here in the United States. Most, if not all, vegetable oils, seed oils are banned in Europe. I know every time I go to Europe and I kind of become a bad boy and start eating things that I normally don't eat here, I never feel sick, never feel ill at any of the restaurants. And I've corroborated this with many, many people. People on the internet that have talked about it, that they travel to Europe and don't have issues, friends and family, people that have digestive disorders that go there and they feel great. They don't have any problems. So it's really something of a very high issue. Be careful about eating out. I'm very careful and watchful now. I try not to eat out unless it's absolutely necessary. But if you do, just keep an eye and be very careful about what you are eating when you eat out. So be careful of vegetable oils. These are high in omega-6, and they can throw your omega-6, omega-3 fatty acid levels off. And that could cause big issues, leading to, we're going to talk about this towards the end of this talk, mitochondrial dysfunction, metabolic dysfunction, cancer, and on all the potential ramifications. Trans fats are a major issue. So definitely be careful of where you're eating, what you're eating. Make sure that the trans fats are down to zero, or ideally to zero. These are mostly in processed foods, ultra processed foods. So be careful about what you're eating and how much of it you are eating. Low vitamin C can result in cholesterol issues. Glycation. So this is a big dangerous one, glycation. So this is when you combine glucose or fructose, so sugar with protein or fat. So let me give you some examples. It might sound somewhat familiar. Barbecue sauce on steak. So that barbecue sauce has sugar on there. Typically, they put either brown sugar, white sugar, or any kind of sugar, honey sometimes, things like that. Put that on your steak. You put that on the oven or in the frying pan or on the barbecue. That can cause glycation because it's just sugar blended in with a protein, or it could be a fat. French fries, perfect example. Terrible glycation, horrible food. French fries, when you get them out, these are put in usually vegetable oils or seed oils that are constantly used. But it's a carbohydrate, which in essence is a glucose fructose mixed in with a fat, and a horrible fat at that. And now you get this horrible glycation effect. Another very dangerous one, donuts. So donuts, as you know, they're fried. So having something that is fried blended with a carb, very dangerous. And then another big one that is unfortunately quite common, and it's something that kids are addicted to, is high fructose corn syrup. So definitely make sure, these things you want to be really careful with feeding kids or your family. I personally don't put any barbecue sauce on my steak. If you're going to put anything, any kind of condiment on there, I would put it on at the end. Don't put it on before you cook your steak or chicken or turkey or anything like that. Spices, not a problem. You can spice it up to your content. But anything that is in a liquid form that has a sugar on it, that is where you want to be really careful. Surgery, obviously, because that's somewhat tied to stress. It's causing some sort of stress event. And then visceral fat is another big issue. So we even have people that are what we call skinny fat, where they're actually skinny. You look at them and you go, wow, they're so skinny, but their cholesterol could be through the roof, or their triglyceride is out of control. It's because the fat is actually around, we've talked about visceral fat, is around the organs, especially around the liver. The liver's enlarged. So in that case, you want to be really careful. So visceral fat is a big concern, especially with the younger generation. So we talked about the importance of cholesterol being hormone balance, and that's important for metabolism, reproduction, obviously, mood. So if you have your hormone balance off, that can impact your overall mood. You can become depressed, anxious. You can become lethargic, kind of very unenergetic and really unmotivated. It can impact certainly sleep, and then other processes, especially as you get older. As you get older, it starts to affect it more and more. The other part that cholesterol plays, I may have mentioned this, is digestion and nutrient absorption. So it has a role in bile production, and that's the fluid. It's like a digestive fluid, kind of like an oil in a car, that's created by the liver. And this goes and dissolves fats and absorbs fat-soluble vitamins. So things like vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin E, and vitamin K, these are fat-soluble. Some of the other vitamins, like most vitamin Bs, Cs, or C, I'm drawing a blank on the other vitamins that are water-soluble. So those, when when they're water-soluble, you don't need to take it with a meal or don't need it with a diet. You can just pop the pill and you can take it with water. And then it gets excreted through the urine. So you can't somewhat, quote unquote, overdose on it. But vitamin A, D, E, and K need fat. So that usually should be with a meal, or it needs fat to be able to get absorbed. Without that, you're not going to get absorption well into the cell. So the liver creates this bile, and the bile is there to help get this process going. And then we talked about cell membrane function. Another big part that people overlook about cholesterol and the importance of it is brain health and cognitive function. So interestingly, the brain is made up of about 50% cholesterol. So it's really important for your brain health and your cognitive function. It's there to basically help with the synapses, and these synapses in your brain are structures that help kind of the neurons communicate, so they connect and they signal back and forth with each other. So what's that important for? Things like learning, memory, motor control, things like that are really important for the brain to be functioning appropriately. In fact, there was a study published not that long ago in a journal called Journal of Alzheimer's Disease that they found that when you lower cholesterol levels, and in particular what they were looking at is patients with statin drugs, that it actually impaired brain function and led to cognitive decline and eventually neurodegenerative disease, like things like dementia. So this is why I'm really careful. Some of you may have already heard from me that my LDL was up a little bit, not anything excruciating. And my cardiologist wanted to put me on a statin, and I fought him tooth and nail. But this is the kind of stuff that you have to be careful about. I know a lot of the doctors nowadays are very statin. They jump to statins and are very statin friendly. It's got all sorts of potential long-term risks, one of which is this very issue of leading to cognitive decline, including dementia. So be really careful. Interestingly, in another publication called Nutrients, there was a study published that they looked at ketogenic fat rats. So remember, what does ketogenic mean? Low carb diet. So they were low carb, high fat, in particular diet that these rats were fed. Had about 25%, these rats had 25% lower body mass, and we talked about that in the past, 80% lower levels of serum insulin, when we talked about that, why the insulin goes down, because you're lowering the carbs, 50% lower levels of glucose, again, that goes hand in hand. But here's the interesting part. They found 55% lower levels of triglycerides and 20% lower levels of total cholesterol when they were on a ketogenic diet. So interesting, right? So these people, you would think ketogenic, they're eating high fat, low carb, but their triglyceride and overall cholesterol actually dropped. In another study that was published in the Journal of American College of Nutrition, found that the higher percentage of calories in a form of carbohydrate, so if you eat carbohydrates, they showed elevated LDL and low levels of HDL cholesterol levels. So interesting, right? Exactly the opposite. So, the one thing to keep in mind is that initially, if you start on a keto diet, so if you do end up decreasing carbs and going higher fat, which is typically what's needed to keep you satiated, because carbs kind of keep you full, although it's short term. So what do people do when they go low carb? They go on a higher fat to help keep them satiated for longer periods. They don't have the crashes, right? So initially, when you do that and you're kind of going through this detox, your LDL level may actually go up. But that takes time because the body's got to kind of get used to burning and using up fat. So be really careful about your diet and your cholesterol levels. Just keep an eye on it. This is something I highly recommend measuring. And that cholesterol, just as a side note, that they found the LDL levels is type A. So again, type A was the quote good one, whereas type B is the bad one. So that's also important to know, and we're going to talk about some of the things to ask for. So there's some natural remedies that you can use that's been published that can help with managing your cholesterol. things like bile salts, and we'll talk about that. Omega-3 fatty acids, really, really important, and we've talked about that in other sessions. And then other, certain types of herbs. So bile salts. These help kind of metabolize fat. They convert cholesterol and so to bile, and we excrete the excess through our feces. So they're really important. The bile salts, bile and bile salts are really important as a function of keeping cholesterol under kind of control, if you will. But if you have things like gallbladder dysfunction, or a poor gallbladder, or if you had your gallbladder removed, or if you have liver disease, so any kind of liver disease, any issues with malabsorption or pancreatic disorders, these people are going to be at risk for bile salt deficiency. So this is where you're going to need to supplement with some sort of a bile salt. And so it's going to be important to kind of keep things intact and keep that cholesterol excreted through your feces rather than sitting in the blood. There's one particular product I use, if any of you are interested or have concerns with gallbladder function, liver disease. I know that's a big issue. Most people don't even know they have enlarged livers or non-alcohol related liver disease. And that product is called TUDCA, TUDCA. Find it online. So it's over the counter. You don't need a prescription for it. So I use that every night, either first bite or right before I eat. You can take it on an empty stomach and just follow the, whatever the prescription says on the bottle. But that helps with bile. That's basically a form of a bile salt. That helps with bile and the excretion of the cholesterol. And some of you might be asking, well, why are you taking it? And the main reason is because my liver is a little enlarged, and most likely, I assume, although it's kind of tough to know exactly why, my diet's as well controlled as it can be. Mine is probably due to the insomnia, and your liver can get enlarged if you're not getting sufficient amount of sleep because the body's under high stress. So that's most likely the case, and also because of my Hashimoto's. So I do take TUDCA every night, and at night now because of Ramadan, but usually in the morning, before or after Ramadan. Vitamin B3, also known as niacin, it helps get your cholesterol under control. It's a really, really good vitamin for many things: longevity, overall health. A lot of people right now are getting NAD shots and other kind of longevity type things, or the kind of the feel good injections. You can skip all that cost and go through, just use niacin. It's part of that same Krebs cycle pathway, and I'll show you a quick picture of it. For any of you that are medical in nature, you'll appreciate it. Otherwise, can somewhat be overwhelming. Omega-3 fatty acids, like we talked about, from fish, I prefer salmon. That has the highest level of omega-3 fatty acids. Cod liver oil is another good one. Sounds gross, but I take it every day and haven't had any issues. Doesn't leave a bad aftertaste in your mouth. Nowadays, they have it flavored as orange or lemon or whatever. I think the one I get is lemon. It's a Norwegian cod. It's excellent form of vitamin A, vitamin D, as well as giving you the omega-3 fatty acids. This will increase your HDL. It'll lower your triglyceride level, and it also will reduce the small, dense LDL. So if you remember, that's the type B, type LDL. There was a study published in Nutrition that supplementing with omega-3 fatty acids can stimulate the production of HDL in the liver. So actually, they were able to prove that EPA and DHA, which are the two forms of the omega-3 fatty acids, actually helped with HDL production in the liver. Turmeric is a great compound. I can't talk enough about turmeric. It's fantastic. As much as you can get it into your body, do it. It's antioxidant, and it's mainly made up of this polyphenol called curcumin, and that is known to also decrease cholesterol amongst many other benefits that it has. There's high antioxidants, so there's some reported evidence to support that it shrinks cancer cells and things like that. So turmeric has been shown to lower LDL cholesterol and your triglycerides. So it's really, really good. In a study that was published in a journal called Phytotherapy Research, they found 12 weeks of turmeric was associated with an improved HDL to LDL ratio, and it significantly improved the lipid profile, overall lipid profile for these patients. Red yeast rice is excellent. I use this in lieu of any statins. I get it over the counter. Again, be careful with any supplementation, where you're getting it from, the sourcing. But I use red yeast rice every day. It's a fermented type of rice. It does not increase your blood sugar or anything like that. It contains this manocolin K, which is a fungal byproduct that helps regulate cholesterol. So it's been shown to work the same as statins, believe it or not. And interestingly, it has almost the same side effects as statins as well, in terms of like muscular, but without the other side effects like we just talked about, like lowering cholesterol through a statin can cause potential dementia or cognitive impairment. Red yeast rice will not do that, but it does give you the muscular issues and things like that. This is why typically if you get red yeast rice, it will come automatically with coenzyme Q10. So coenzyme Q10 is what's used to kind of counteract the muscle issues that you can get. But I love red yeast rice. I haven't gone in to get my blood cholesterol checked probably until after Ramadan to see how effective it is, but there's tremendous evidence in the past of its usage and its assistance to help regulate cholesterol. In fact, there was a study in Cureus, Cureus, that also interestingly found probiotics had a significant effect on triglycerides and LDL proteins. So a lot of benefit here. I would highly recommend that you get these tests done periodically, especially if you're getting older. 45 and 65 men, 55 to 65 women should probably get this done at least at minimum a year. I wouldn't, risk it and wait longer. If you do have any triglyceride, LDL, HDL levels that are outside the norm, you should probably get it even more often because you want to be careful of potential impacted heart disease and heart conditions. But the key is here, you want to make sure that your doctor is also checking, not just checking those tests that are somewhat antiquated and outdated, but also doing the particle size test that we talked about to rule out type A versus type B. So I know that when I looked it up, NMR lipid panel from LabCorp. So if you go to LabCorp, NMR lipid panel will do that. If you go to Quest, if your insurance is through Quest, Cardio IQ is the test that's done. So make sure you push your doctors to get these tests done for you, especially if your levels are out of norm. So your LDL levels are up. So this will basically categorize whether you have the big fluffy ones, which is the type A, versus the small and dense ones, which is the type B. The other thing that you should be getting tested is for metabolic syndrome, or what's known as diabetes, because if those levels are up and you're also having metabolic syndrome, then that can cause a major issue. where your triglyceride to HDL ratio gets out of whack, especially if it's like over 2. That could be a real issue. And that's when you want to get tested for like your insulin response, as well as your hemoglobin A1C. So again, we need to get a lot more sophisticated with our testing. So be an advocate for yourself. Make sure that, again, when you're going to get your normal panel tests, that it's not outdated, it's not antiquated, that you're doing the most state-of-the-art type tests. So get the particle sizing assessment, as well as get your insulin checked, insulin response, hemoglobin A1C, and make sure that you're not dealing with metabolic disorders. So we've got about 17 minutes or so. I'm going to just quickly go through a very interesting topic that's picking up a lot of momentum called methylene blue. So a lot of you have probably heard about it. The younger population, definitely. I know RFK Jr. Has been noted to have been drinking it. I know he's an advocate of promoting it for the FDA to kind of facilitate it through the approval pathway, although it is currently available over the counter, so you don't need a prescription, you can use it, but you do want to be careful. If you do decide to use it, you want to definitely consult with your doctor, and then also make sure that you're getting a reputable brand. So you want to be really careful that you're not getting duped and getting something that could be potentially toxic. But this is just for education purposes of what methylene blue is, as you're probably hearing about it. So methylene blue it's actually synthetic, and it also comes in prescription form, and it's an antioxidant. It's an antimicrobial, even antiviral, and there's some interesting data I'll share with you. But more importantly, above anything else, it's actually oxygen boosting. So it's got antioxidant properties, but it also actually helps your mitochondria cells. So we'll talk about all that. So interesting history of methylene blue. It's been in existence since 1870s. It was originally used for textile dyes, things like actually they were dyeing jeans back in the day. So back in the 1800s, if you were wearing blue jeans, it was most likely dyed with methylene blue. And then soon thereafter, that time, as doctors were using it, they found it's effective for malaria, and it's also had antibiotic effects, but more interestingly, it had antipsychotic effects, and we'll talk about the mechanism there. In a study that was published in the Journal of Orthopedic Surgery and Research, they found that that methylene blue contained antimicrobial agents against Candida, which is a fungus, Staphylococcus, as well as E. coli. So it actually, goes directly against these microbes. And then, even more interesting, in a recent study in Scientific Reports, this article found that methylene blue. This was their conclusion of the article. Methylene blue displays virucidal, preventative, and therapeutic activity against influenza virus, interestingly H1N1 and SARS-CoV-2. So very interesting. Methylene blue, as I mentioned, does have neuroprotective properties. So there's been some research in Curious that published that it actually lowers the risk of Alzheimer's and Parkinson's disease, and it may in fact improve memory function, mood, focus, and also if you have fatigue, mental fatigue. The other part is a part of an antioxidant in cellular function is mitochondria, which is a real cornerstone of our health and cells function. Mitochondria basically takes food and it converts it into adenosine triphosphate, or ATP, that gives us the energy to be able to do things each day. And so if the mitochondria can't get its energy to function, then it ends up in cell death. And this is actually when we die. Interestingly, there's this programmed cell death. And this is, I think, the Prophet, if I'm not mistaken, I remember having heard that there was a hadith that the Prophet had said that this is a disease, death is a disease that will never be cured. And it's because the mitochondria is kind of pre-programmed. I know that's what everybody's working on nowadays to try to increase longevity, is to minimize, the risk to dying early, and in fact, expanding lifespan, which is really interesting. And that's all done through the mitochondria because it's the powerhouse. And that's where all the energy comes in. It breaks down carbs and fats and everything through this process that they call oxidative phosphorylation. And so when you have mitochondrial dysfunction or issues, this is where health concerns start. Things like fatigue, heart disease, diabetes, neurodegenerative disease, gastrointestinal problems. So as we age, the mitochondrial function declines. And this is what causes age-related diseases and eventually decreased lifespan. So we need to kind of reverse this process. And that's usually done through diet, exercise, good sleep, mental relaxation. Like we've talked about all the things that we've been talking about for over the past 2 or 3 weeks. But then what's interesting is that methylene blue actually improves mitochondrial energy metabolism. So it acts as an artificial electron carrier in what we call the electron transport chain. So this is what allows this whole process of the mitochondria to work. So it actually improves mitochondrial function, which is amazing. And then it also helps with oxygen metabolism and transportation, which is really critical and important for the cells to be able to function. And that is done through hemoglobin. So what's scary in terms of statistics is that the majority, about 94% of Americans have mitochondrial dysfunction. It's a tremendous amount of people that have mitochondrial dysfunction. And this can result, when it does happen, in reactive oxygen species, which is what we talked about before, via the oxidation process. So it's basically your bodies and cells are oxidizing, they're dying. And so can create all sorts of diseases, things like metabolic dysfunction that we've talked about, insulin resistance being a part of that, and then toxification, things like brain issues leading to brain fog, blood pressure issues, and things like that. Now, what's interesting is that they found that when they use methylene blue, that if there was any blockages in the cycle, and I'll show a picture of it, the Krebs cycle, the citric acid cycle, it actually detoxes. So methylene blue detoxes. And people start automatically feeling better. The brain fog goes away. The blood pressure normalizes. And the theory is that because it has antioxidant properties, it's actually rebooting or regenerating your mitochondria. So it's kind of giving it an extra layer of oomph. Just as a side note, what was also interesting is that metformin, which is used for diabetes, for blood sugar control, destroys one of the complexes. There's several complexes within the cycle, and metformin is known to destroy. So it actually has oxidative properties. So you want to be really careful with metformin. If you are taking metformin, it's something to be really cognizant of. So you definitely want to try to counteract. So things to be watchful of and for your education. In a research paper in Scientific Reports, they found that methylene blue promotes wound healing and it thickens skin. And so it's used for the anti-aging phenomenon. Related to like collagen production and what have you. In another article in Frontiers in Pharmacology, they found anti-cancer properties. So various tumor sizes within cancer, including carcinoma, colorectal cancer, melanoma, was reduced. So very interesting. That makes sense through its antioxidant properties. I will share my screen. So here's a picture of the Krebs cycle, citric acid cycle. So you can see the NAD pathway, the NAD to NAD plus to NADH, and then the FAD to FADH2. You can see the NAD, NADH is throughout. So this is the pathway in which the methylene blue actually plays a role here. So it's really, really interesting that through this process, it can actually help with mitochondrial health, ATP production, and what have you. So what are the overall six benefits of methylene blue? It's been known to be a methemoglobinemia cure, and they actually use it in the emergency rooms when people come in with carbon monoxide poisoning or septic shock, or what have you. So it's actually used in the hospitals nowadays, or has been used, and again, back until the 1870s. In low doses, it acts as anti-inflammatory and antioxidant. And then it increases the neurotransmitters in the brain, things like dopamine, norepinephrine, serotonin. So interestingly, we talked about antipsychotic effects initially that they found. So it behaves like a monoamine oxidase inhibitor, what they call MAOIs, which is a type of an antidepressant drug that is used. Rare, I think you see more SSRIs or SNRIs nowadays, but MAOIs still has a place, and it's been around for ages. And these hormones are there to help you with your mood, regulate your mood, and they give you kind of these feel-good sensations. In a study that was published in Biological Psychiatry, they found that when these patients use daily methylene blue, they add pretty potent antidepressant effects in those with severe depressive illness. And it also has been shown to help with anxiety, especially in those that have bipolar disorders. So a lot of benefit with your mental health as well. Some of the risks. So what are the risks? So probably the most common or most well-known risk is obviously it's a dye, so it can give discoloration in your mouth. So your mouth can look blue. You can actually have blue urine and stool, which could kind of be freaky. And then what really can get really scary, I think in some of the articles, I haven't used it, but in some of the articles, they say that people, if they took it with like vitamin B, because vitamin B will make your urine somewhat dark yellow. So when this blue is taken in with it, it goes in and mixes with that. People urinate and they end up getting this like really fluorescent type of a yellow urine, and or kind of greenish bluish tinge, and they freak out. So just something to be careful of. Nothing's been published that indicates that in and of itself is a risk other than just unpleasant looks, right? Serious side effects can happen if you're taking methylene blue with SSRIs because there is a drug interaction there because it is an MAOI inhibitor. In fact, if you look at most drug labels for SSRIs, they will say that it's contraindicated in patients that are on MAOI. So this is why you want to be really careful not taking anything ever without doctor's consent, especially if you're taking medication, or at least consulting with your doctor and or pharmacist. And that can result in big issues related to what they call serotonin syndrome. And then the other part is there's been some data to support that it's not healthy or safe for patients that are pregnant or while they're breastfeeding. So how do we improve mitochondrial health other than methylene blue? Number one, exercise. We've talked about this kind of in summary about what we've talked about through these last few weeks. Physical exercise, high intensity interval training, things like that can help with mitochondrial function. A diet rich in antioxidants. We've talked about the fruits and vegetables, nuts, things that can help, protect against long-term free radical damage. stress management. Can't stress that enough. Mindful meditation, yoga, breathing techniques that we've talked about, anything that can reduce your stress, long walks, you get a double whammy. Because if you're doing long walks, you're getting the stress management as well as exercise. There's some evidence to show that cold exposure, so cold baths, cold showers, cold plunges, things like that, anything that stimulates cold response can actually enhance mitochondria growth and enhance their efficacy. So something to be cognizant of. Sleep and rest, one of the big things to help with mitochondrial repair and rejuvenation, especially if you have mitochondrial dysfunction. It's something that's really critical. And then I know I talked about this. Coenzyme Q10 is a huge antioxidant, something that they give for heart disease as well as with red yeast rice extract. I said it's there to help with the muscle issues that come with the side effects of that, as well as with statins. They highly recommend coenzyme Q10. Alpha lipoic acid is a strong antioxidant that's been known to help with mitochondrial health. I myself take alpha lipoic acid every morning. So I do encourage you to look into it and see if it's something that is potentially useful for you. But another big one is the omega-3 fatty acids. This is going to really, really give a boost to your mitochondrial health, especially if you get it from fresh fish, salmon and sardines, anchovies, any small tight fish, but really the big one here is salmon. So with that, I wish you all a very pleasant and lovely weekend. I hope that you all enjoy the rest of your iftar tonight and the rest of your evening. And inshallah, you have a blessed last day tomorrow. Hopefully, inshallah, if everything goes well, and we'll be celebrating Eid on Saturday. Tomorrow, I'll plan on talking about a very important topic for mental health, which is addiction. So what is addiction? Why is it there and not just addiction? Because when we think of addiction, we think of drug addiction, alcohol addiction, but there's other addictions to pornography, to shopping, to food, to social media, gambling, all these things. So it's a big issue within human society. And I think in more recent years, we've been seeing a lot more and more of it because of what we're seeing within social media. So I'll try to focus on that, and hopefully that will be of value, of benefit for you and your families. And until then, I wish you a very pleasant evening, a beautiful iftar, and please keep me in your du'as as I will have you in mine. And may you all have a blessed evening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.